MashaAllah. About time.
Assalamu alaikum, man. How are you?
Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Inshallah. Let's make a start, I think.
Let's make a start, yeah.
Give me a second. Okay, so MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh to all those who have joined. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa laqibatul muttaqin. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Maulana Muhammadin wa barik sallam wa salli alayhi. So Alhamdulillah, you've been experiencing many technical difficulties there, but Alhamdulillah, we got there in the end. I don't know why I didn't think about Instagram first, actually, but Alhamdulillah, Instagram was where it's meant to be.
Yeah.
For those who are joining us from Facebook. But Alhamdulillah, I am joined here by Ustadhah Khadijah Afandi, not Afendi, from Scotland, MashaAllah, Glasgow, and MashaAllah, Ustadhah Khadijah began her studies locally in Scotland with the local ulama there, and then she was MashaAllah called to visit the blessed land of Yemen, Dar al-Zahra, where the female study generally is known as Dar al-Mustafa, the whole institute, but the actual place for the females is called Dar al-Zahra. So MashaAllah, she spent 5 years there, after which she then returned to Scotland and served in the capacity of female resident scholar. To my knowledge, the only person who has done that to date, MashaAllah, for a period of 4 years, after which she then traveled to Senegal for a year to teach and study, and is currently studying in Mauritania. So, Ustadhah Khadijah, marhaban, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I hope you're well. It's nice to finally see you.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Inshallah, I think we'll go straight into it. So, yeah, inshallah, just tell us about, or give us a glimpse, inshallah, into the life of what it was like in Yemen with
Okay.
Habib.
Yeah. So, subhanAllah, what can I say about Yemen? Like, there's so many stories there. But just like daily life in Yemen, it was like kind of started at kind of like tahajjud time. So you get up at tahajjud time, pray your tahajjud, read your awrad, pray fajr, read awrad until sunrise. Then after sunrise, you would have your first lesson. And then after that lesson, you had breakfast. And then from about, I think it was like 8 o'clock in the morning till Dhuhr time, you had lessons back to back. Prayed Dhuhr, read awrad, had khaylula, had lunch, prayed asr, awrad, more lessons, like, you know, so there's a whole tarbiyah. So like the whole thing around Dar al-Mustafa and Dar al-Zahra is like the tarbiyah. So there's, you know, doing your lessons and doing your studies, but also being attentive, like, to your ibadah, to your awrad. And one of the things that we done there is we read awrad in Jama'ah. We always read the awrad in Jama'ah. You know, because they always say the barakah is in the Jama'ah, so we always read it together. It wasn't like, you know, you would go off to different places and sit and read it. No, you read it together. And it was something that was compulsory, was to have your litanies, and it was compulsory to uphold that litany daily. You know, so much so, like, to the point, it's like when things started going wrong, people were like, did you read your awrad? Like, did you make sure you read your awrad? Did you come for the Jummah and awrad? So it was all about, you know, living the sunnah, being attentive to your studies, being attentive to your khidmah, and being attentive to your ibadah. That was the whole...
The full Sufi lifestyle, yeah?
Yeah, that was like the whole kind of Sufi traditional kind of student of knowledge kind of lifestyle, you know, and the barakah and the Jama'ah extended beyond reading awrad or praying together. So like for me and Darazara, you know, we shared rooms, so maybe there'd be 5 people in a room or 10 people in a room. We ate together, we travelled together. Like if we went out for ziyaras, we went for ziyarah together. So everything that we done was together. There was never kind of like a moment in time where you were just like by yourself. Like that didn't exist. So everything was basically in the Jama'ah. Absolutely everything was done in Jama'ah.
Yeah, I think that the aspect of companionship, you know, sisterhood for sisters is, I don't think it can be overstated, mashallah. I think being a student in a madrasa myself and having experienced that, I think, yes, you know, it's true that some of those people go on to become friends for life, but at the same time, the blessed moments, we used to say that the years ticked off, you know, from life, you know, because your element of sin, your exposure to sin is very limited. You're very protected, and at the same time, you're with people who, mashallah, who are doing the same thing as you. And we know, alhamdulillah, that the angels, the wings are beneath the students of knowledge. But alhamdulillah, they're in the protection of Allah and in the blessings of Allah.
Yeah, I mean, alhamdulillah, also as well, it kind of like teaches you to be less selfish, to be honest, because it's not just about you anymore. There's a Jama'ah now, and it teaches you about preferring others over yourself, which is like, you know, a prophetic teaching. Is like you're literally actively going out there and preferring others over yourself, which I think is something as a student of knowledge, if you get into that, like, you know, if you graduate and you get into that community, you're teaching, you're doing things, you're serving as an imam or whoever, you basically need to learn how to put others before yourself, or how to put others' needs before yourself. And it's not like the whole thing of neglecting yourself, but it's also like, you know, if you're attending to the needs of others and you're prioritizing that within your community, what you have to do, like, everybody benefits from that. So it's like the well-being of the Jama'ah comes into that, and that is something that you definitely learn being in an environment, and that it's not just about you. Like, you know, there's the greater well-being as well, and that teaches you about the ummah, because it's like, you know, what happens in the micro happens in the macro. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's like in this cross section, in this madrasa, somewhere in the middle of Yemen, you have a collection of people who are acting as their own mini ummah within those spaces, and you find everything within there. So you find the good, the bad, the ugly, the blessed, like the hard times, the stresses, the laughs, the crying. Like, you find everything in there, and you have to learn how to kind of get through that together, sort of thing as well.
100%. Anything else you want to say on that before we go to a different country?
No, like, continue. What happened?
So take us to Senegal. What was that like?
Senegal was something completely different, right? So whereas in Yemen it was more conservative. It was more conservative, especially amongst like females. You didn't really interact so much with like the opposite sex. You were like, you know, wearing the niqab, you were wearing like everything was like, you know, maratib. But here, like, when you go to Senegal is something completely different. So in Senegal, I was living in a madrasa for children, basically, and I was teaching there. So the madrasa was primarily for children who were either orphaned or just really wanted to learn Quran, or for parents out there who just simply couldn't really take care of their kids anymore because maybe financial issues or whatever. So I was living in the madrasa there, and I was teaching Quran, but I was also studying, and I was studying more one-to-one. So it was a more one-to-one basis I had with my teachers in Senegal as well as doing the teaching and helping looking after the kids, you know, putting their needs in as well. But also as well, what was very different is there was more freedom of movement. Like, so as a woman, there was more kind of freedom of movement, and it was just a very different vibe. You were very much kind of like responsible for yourself. So whereas you know, you kind of get places like maybe Jamia Al Karam, or you get places like Dar al Mustafa, you have like, you know, people around you who are kind of responsible for you, you know, and they're kind of there in a sort of way to kind of hold your hand. Whereas in like you go, you know, you study in places like Senegal or you study in places like Mauritania, like you're responsible for yourself and what you're doing and how you're using your time. So there was a lot of kind of adjustments of like, how was I going to use my time? How was I going to utilize my studies and the time I used for like teaching as well and like preparing classes? But also outside of that, there was, you know, going to the masjid. So going to the masjid for 5 daily prayers, being attending in group dhikr, been attending in different majlises and different projects as well. And I think, you know, one of the things that really stuck out to me being in Senegal is the love of people. So when I say the love of people, people's ibadah or people's worship or people's khidmah or being in the masjid or visiting the shiok, and it was more driven out of love, because you know, in some kind of communities they think, you know, maybe the prayer or whatever is more driven out of a sense of duty, like, oh, we have to pray, we have to do this, and we have to. Whereas I think like amongst the Senegalese people, the drive was love. It was just love. So there was no separation between like their lives and religion. Like it was something that comes as one, and that's something that's quite similar in Mauritania as well. It's like, you know, there's that love there. So that was kind of like one thing that I noticed in Senegal. And also as well, another thing that I noticed with being in Senegal was the presence of women in religious spaces. There was a big presence of women in religious spaces. So regardless of whatever time you went to the masjid, whether it would be for tahajjud or whether it would be for Isha or whatever time, or for the group dhikr, there was always women present. There was always women present in the majlises. There was always women present, you know, in projects and leading things. So, like for instance, like, you know, there's a lot of female scholarship. There's sort of female scholarship. Two female scholars I can think of right off the top of my head is like Sheikh Nias. Like she's a big female scholar. She was someone who was the first African woman, I believe, to write a book in Arabic on women's rights in Islam. You know, so she was someone who was very involved. She's older now, but she was someone who was very involved. Her sisters as well took part in that Islamic scholarship, and there is a presence of women doing tarbiyah and teaching, even men and women. So, and this was really interesting to see, because, you know, to a certain degree you did see it in Yemen, but it was more behind closed doors. This was kind of like a different view of seeing women in action in these religious spaces, but openly. Like, you know, they were openly there. You know, they were openly, like, you know, giving kalima. They were openly giving tarbiyah. There was a focus and there was a place there for them. And it was something that you've seen in everyday life, which was something that I found quite different to other spaces. And to be honest, it kind of like inspired me to kind of go further with my studies as well, to see these women in action and to see the level of involvement these women had in that everyday religious space.
MashaAllah. No, I think it sounds like it's very there's a lot more freedom, it's a lot more open than Yemen, MashaAllah. So what would you say is unique to Senegal? Or what stood out to you? What do you say? Is that what it is? Or
like the thing I'd probably say, like, you know, the thing is, like, Senegal and Yemen both have their places. You know, they both have their places, and they both have, you know, that barakah and that muhabba, but it just comes through in different ways. And I think like the thing that makes kind of Senegal different is I think how the people just love, like, you know, I'm very convinced that, like, if you want to see love and religion, go to Africa. Because, like, you know, you look at Senegal, you look at Nigeria, you look at different places, and, like, you see people whose fuel in religion is the love of Allah. It's the love of the Prophet ﷺ. And that is their driving force in their ibadah and the dhikr that they do, and the salah that they make. And, you know, and that's not just restricted to the ulama in this place, because the ulama is, like, subhanallah, like, some of these ulama, you know, they're just phenomenal people, but it trickles down into the community. So even from your ulama to your person who has no formal education, like even some who can't read, but they know Fatiha, like, you know, and the thing that pushes them is that love of Allah and that longing for Allah. And I'm not saying it's not present in other places, but what I think is unique about Senegal is I see it so openly. It's something that happens so openly rather than behind closed doors or in certain pockets. Like, it happens quite openly. And, you know, and that's been my experience of Senegal. It's like to witness that love that propels them to, you know, adhere to the Sharia, read the Quran, pray 5 times a day, fast in Ramadan. It's out of love rather than that sense of duty. Oh, we have to do it because we're Muslim. And if anything, it makes the Muslim experience in Senegal a more lived experience rather than a conceptualized idea of what Islam's supposed to be.
Yeah, it's got a soul as opposed to just a box.
Yeah.
And boundaries. MashaAllah. So what would you say? Well, actually, yeah, inshallah, let's go to another country of Mauritania now. And this is back towards, I'm not sure what this is. Is it more freedom now? Is this back towards restriction and strictness?
So Mauritania, like, subhanAllah, Mauritania and Senegal, they're very interesting because they're right next door to each other. But they're different in so many ways. And in Mauritania, there is a sense of freedom there as well. You have your pockets in Mauritania where they're a bit more conservative, a bit more, you know, kind of low key. And then you have your other areas of Mauritania where it's just very, it is very open.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, for instance, like being in Mauritania. So I'm in Matamolana. I'm in the village of Matamolana, and Matamolana is a little bit more conservative than maybe some other places. And the reason for that is it's a centre of Islamic learning. So the village itself is like, you know, pushed forward as a centre of Islamic learning, and a village centered on the Islamic way of life, or the Islamic prescription of life. So, like, you know, as much to the Sunnah as they can possibly make it to. And so it makes it a little bit more conservative, but not conservative in the sense that you are restricted greatly. And to be honest, like I found a lot of freedom, like, in Matamolana. Like, my teachers, for instance, they're very accommodating to females. They have a muhadra that's just for women. So they have a lot of muhadras in the village, and even they have muhadras in other villages in Mauritania, and they also accommodate women. But you'll find some villages a little bit more conservative than others. So in my village, they have a muhadra just for women. That's the muhadra that I attend. But at the same time, we still have the access to the scholars that the male students have as well, and we are free to also attend the lessons in the other muhadra. We're free to be in the masjid. We're free to be basically any place that we want to be. It's just more like, when I say conservative, it's more about the adab of the place and how you conduct yourself and how you behave yourself. But in terms of like where you can go, where you can be, and who you can talk to, that is basically up to your own accord. And I really love Senegal and Mauritania, like, for that, because Mauritania, similar to Senegal in that sense, you find a real living Islam in that. And like, you know, everybody knows their boundaries, everybody knows like how far they can take things, everybody knows what they can do, what they can't do, and the driving force in that is, again, it's love of Allah. But also, one thing that I really admire about Mauritania, from my own experience in dealing with the scholars in Mauritania, is there's no kind of separation between them and the people. You know, like, I can go to my teacher's house and knock on my teacher's door, and he'd be like, marhaba, marhaba, like, you know, and there's a real sense of that. Like, that's not just for me because I'm their student, but anybody who needs them, because they've dedicated themselves completely to the service of the people and the service of Allah. In that, and there's no kind of boundary between you and them, in the sense of, okay, the boundary is the Sharia, but you know, you don't have to go through 4 or 5 people to go speak to the Shaykh, especially as a woman. Like, you can go directly and the Shaykh will entertain you, he'll give you the time that you need. But also as well, like, another thing in Mauritania is they have even more of an emphasis on female scholarship. And even though in Mauritania a little bit it's hidden itself, in Mauritania, you find that many of the big ulama in Mauritania, their tarbiyah or their Islamic teachings, their primary Islamic teachings, or their primary tarbiyah sometimes goes back to some of the female scholars. Like, one of my teachers, his mother, for instance, was someone who was very big on, you know, transmitting tarbiyah and transmitting Islamic knowledge amongst some of the leading ulama in the country of Mauritania at this time. And, you know, it really comes through, and you can really see that. And there's, you know, when you look into the history, like, you know, of Islam in Africa, you see that there's a massive tradition of female scholarship in Africa. Not just like in Senegal and Mauritania, but also you've got it in Morocco, you've got it in Algeria, and in Nigeria and Ghana and stuff as well. Like, in that kind of northwest Africa, there is like a huge tradition of it, and it's really interesting to see. Like, some of it might take place behind closed doors, some it might take place in the open, but it's something very profound to witness, and it's something on witnessing that kind of gave me the himma to go further. It inspired me to go further, to kind of emulate myself on these type of women that I see, because it gave me a good example of someone being from the West, because you're like Northwest Africa. Someone being from the West, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate going into community? How do you navigate serving the community, like as a woman who is intending to serve for the sake of Allah, and who may have female students? You may have to interact with men at times, or have male students at times. Like, I've had male students, you know, so, and it kind of gave me that insight. It's like, how do you navigate that? How do you balance that? How do you approach that in a very practical way? But also, you know, having that tarbiyah from Yemen gave me the discipline and the drive, and, you know, the wara within myself to know where my limits are, to know where my boundaries are, and to also appreciate the things that great women of Allah do behind closed doors as well.
Alhamdulillah. Inshallah. I just think the student lives, some of those less times, honestly. Like I said, years off, and alhamdulillah, I think what struck me reading your biography was, mashallah, I think some people are fortunate and they can consider themselves to be fortunate if they've just studied in one place, but to be, or to have studied in, 3 or 4 different places, alhamdulillah, it's a big blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
Ustadhah Khadijah, Mauritania, what was that for you? What was unique or distinct for Mauritania, apart from it being heavily desert?
Apart from the desert, I think my kind of love affair with Mauritania actually began way before. My love affair with Mauritania, I think, actually began when I was studying in Yemen. Because, when I was studying in Yemen, that was when the beginning of, the hypes of the story coming from Mauritania about Murabatul Hajj and about different things. So that was the beginning of my my kind of love affair, or my kind of dream to go study in Mauritania. That was the beginning of it. And then when I got to Senegal, and all the Mauritanian scholars come to Senegal as well, so you got to mingle and meet with the Mauritanian scholars. You got to talk to them or whatever. And my Ustad, my current Ustad in Mata Maulana, we have a very interesting story about how he accepted to teach me. He sat me down in front of the masjid and he started asking me questions about fiqh. And he started asking me, we used to call it fiqh puzzles. So he used to give me these fiqh puzzles. And it was literally just happening outside the masjid. We just sat down in the courtyard. And he's just okay, giving me XYZ scenario and everything. And then I would answer them. And then by the end of it, he was like, yeah, you can come and study in Mauritania if you want to. And that was kind of gave me the excitement. I was yeah, let's go, let's do this. I'm going to study in Mauritania. And one of the things that I love about Mauritania is there's so much barakah. Mauritania, in Senegal, are my 2 favorite places in the world, honestly, because in Mauritania there's just so much barakah. There's so much barakah amongst the people. The people are so friendly, and in my experience, a lot of the people that I've interacted with in Mauritania, they're very conscious of their imanas. They're very conscious of how they are as a people towards you, and the way they treat you as a guest. You feel like the most important person in the world. And that comes from that prophetic tarbiyah, to making that person feel important. And I think that's definitely one thing that makes Mauritania absolutely fascinating. But also from a student point of view, there's always people willing to help you as well. As a student of knowledge, there's always people who are willing to put themselves out for you in that sense. And even in the village that I live in studying, they don't necessarily have student accommodation. You kind of need to maybe rent property or share amongst other students in the place or whatever. And I actually, the place where I stay in the village was basically given to me as a sadaqah. So I was given a room in a Mauritanian family. The Mauritanian family became my friends as well, and they gave me a room in their house.
Mm-hmm.
They gave me a room in their house, and they made it easy for me to do my studies. So apart from having the desert and having the hospitality of the people, and being surrounded, you can walk out your front door and find a camel outside your front door in the morning. Yeah. But really, one of the things that I love the most about Mauritania is their scholars and their scholarship. Their scholarship is not like anything I've ever seen before. Even you find that even in some of the young the young boys and girls who are studying, who have chosen the path of studying, you find that, you know, some of their skills within scholarship is just like the farasa is there. Like, you know, there's so much farasa, there's so much outpouring in that, and it's the same in Senegal as well. Like, those who have dedicated themselves to studying the Islamic sciences there, you see the farasa, you see the dedication, and the outpouring, and then also the people who have committed themselves to supporting those people as well. And I think that is, you know, something that kind of makes like these places like different. Even their methods of studying are quite different as well, which makes it even more distinct from some other places. So it's really an experience that you have to kind of go and witness.
Experience, yeah, mashallah. So talk us through how, or take us back to your thought process in actually deciding to embark on Islamic studies and take a path to knowledge. Yeah, inshallah. Well, what was the? Because it's not a common choice. This is what people don't realize, that being a student of knowledge is not. It's not everyone.
It's not up the top of the list.
Yeah,
like
it's not at the top of the list, 100%.
Yeah, like, so my background, like, originally, like, in a secular sense, like, I studied economics and linguistics. So that's where I started, in economics and linguistics. And by the time I came to the end of it, I was just like, yeah, I don't want to do this. This is not something that I want to do. I don't want to be involved in the corporate world. Like, this was, and I know many people who are involved in the corporate world, or, you know, have like a professional career. Sometimes they feel like that, but, like, you know, they go ahead with it anyway. For me, like, I just had this intense longing to want to learn the deen. Like, and I never even, in the beginning, I never thought of it as like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to go study, and then I'm going to go do dawah, and then I'm going to go do that. Like, that wasn't the thought process. The thought process for me in the beginning was, I have a longing to know the deen, and I have a longing to know Allah. And that was my intention. That was just my initial intention, my initial thought process. And I thought, like, let me sign up for classes, let me go to these masjids, let me, you know, go to the ulama of this place and see what I can learn from them. And when I started learning in the beginning, I loved it. Like, I just loved it so much. Like, I completely fell in love with the whole learning, and I just wanted to know more, and I just wanted to know more, and I wanted to learn Arabic, and I wanted to, you know, go the whole way. I had that desire to do it. It was the longing that was burning in my heart. And you know, but obviously you have other commitments in life. You have, you know, especially if you've started your career or work, or, you know.
Just before you move on, I think studies for someone who has a very inquisitive mind it's a good place to be. So I think obviously you have to be, so with yourself, you're traveling to different countries and so on and so forth. So you have to be a confident person, and you have to be independent in a manner of speaking. Obviously, I remember, like, in America, we were quite young when we went and so on and so forth. So it's slightly different. But I think regardless of what age you are, I think you have to be independent. You have to be very courageous, strong.
But
I think if you have an inquisitive mind, you know, it's very stimulating, and it's very nourishing.
Yeah, like, I mean, you definitely have to be courageous. Like that. I mean, that's the thing. Even if you're not courageous, you need to find it from somewhere. Like, you need to. It's almost like you need to delve into the depths of your soul to, like, pull that up, and just really throw yourself at the mercy of Allah, because that is really what you're doing. Like, you see, as a student of knowledge, like, you know, you're throwing yourself at the mercy of Allah, especially if you're going to go do it abroad. Like, because going to study abroad, it's amazing. Like, it teaches you so much. Like, it teaches you so much about yourself. You improve yourself even personally in so many other ways that you thought you would never. You grow in so many ways you thought you would never. And that's just, like, you know, and that's not including the actual formal process of going to classes and sitting at a teacher's feet and learning and going through books. There's other things that you learn with that, but it takes courage to do that. Like for me, like I'm you know, I'm not married, I'm someone, like I am kind of on my own to a certain degree, and I just thought, let me just throw myself at Allah. Like, I didn't know how I was going to do it, I didn't know how I was going to fund it, I didn't know how I was going to survive in it. I was just like, okay, like, this is what you want, this is the thing it's desiring in your life, nothing else is fulfilling you the way that you want this to be, so just go for it, just do it. And that was kind of like my thought process. I kind of just took a leap. So it wasn't, I didn't, you know, I talked to other students of knowledge, and you find that like, they've found out they've planned X, Y, Z, and they've organised it so well, and you know, they're going to do this, and they've got this time frame of what they're going to do. I was just like, Bismillah. Bismillah, jump into the pool, here I am. And that was basically my process, was just Bismillah.
Yeah, mashallah. I think, yeah, 100% agree. But I think it's actually a lot more difficult. I think like you traveled to a different country, I traveled to a different place. Even the place I was very secluded. So I mean, mashallah, has benefits. You definitely grow, you become independent, you find out a lot about yourself, you push yourself. So alhamdulillah, it's good for character building, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there are skills that, I mean, people experience, or possibly not to the same degree, but in a university, if they you know, in a different city, probably, obviously it depends. There's numerous factors you have to take into consideration. If there's something better to you close to home, you might want to go there, but there's a benefit to go into a different city, I think, and that's part and parcel of what I was saying. So Ustadhah Khadijah, yeah, take us through the journey of your mind and the development of yourself as a human being and as a student of knowledge, inshallah, through all of those years of studies. And what did you feel like you learned or picked up during that time?
You know, I don't even know where to start there, because honestly, I feel like I've learned so much in so many different ways. I learned a lot about myself, like as a human being, in terms of putting it in growth. You know, it gave me kind of more clarity about the person that I want to be, not just as Khadijah, myself and I, but as a Muslim, as a student, as a teacher. You know, I grew in so many different ways. I matured in so many different ways. I gained different types of wisdom, really, in certain things. And also my attitude towards life changed. My attitude towards my relationship with Allah changed. You know, and like in my studies and learning from my teachers primarily, because the thing is, like, you know, when it comes to Islamic studies, and you know this yourself, it's not just about the books, it's about who you're learning the books from. And a lot of what my teachers taught me was holding fast to that Muhammadan way. Like, so even like as a woman, like holding fast to that Muhammadan way. So it's about learning about having that compassion, understanding, you know, really addressing people the way they understand to be addressed, you know, giving people their place, having, like, you know, the wisdom to deal with different situations that you can be called upon. And that wasn't just from like learning books, but that was from taking from the characters of my teachers and taking from the environment that I was surrounding myself. And that, you know, it's like, because it's all well and good, like just in the books, but the books come into reality as well, and you know, you need to figure out like how to apply it, especially if you're going into teaching in the community. And I learned how to do that. I learned how to connect with the people. I learned how, you know, how myself can affect yeah, how to reply, and how does the way that I carry myself affect others as well. So there was a whole load of growth. There was a whole load of learning. And don't get me wrong, like some of those times were hard. Like some of these times, like, you know, there was moments I kind of sat there and I was just like, I want to go home. Like, do you know what I mean? You have those moments, but like you get through it. Like, you know, and so many incidents like happened to me as well that I learned from. You know, like one of my kind of expeditions, I got malaria really badly, like a number of times, and you know, it humbled me. Like something as simple as that, like something as simple as like finding yourself in bad health in those situations as a student, because like, you know, your family's not around you, and you'll experience that even if you just go to uni, study in another city. Like, you know, your family's not around you, it kind of grows in character and strength, and it humbles you. Like, you know, you find a little humbleness in it as well.
Yeah, I think illness when you're in a different place is different. Eh? You can't pretend to be a certain way and, you know, elicit sympathy and ain't no one around you to you know,
Yeah.
to give you some, you know, like that treatment.
Yeah, 100%. Like Sayyid Habib always used to say, whatever's in the inside will show in the outside. Like, you know, so it's like you say, like you can't hide it. You can't hide it forever, especially when you're ill. You can't hide it. Like your character will come out in different ways, and you will see glimpses of yourself that you don't like, and that's another thing as well. Because sometimes, some people might be under the illusion that it's like, oh, if you go and be a student of knowledge, it's like this, it's maratib, it's like this. But sometimes you see really horrible parts of yourself, and you know, and sometimes you see really horrible parts of yourself in others as well. So it's that kind of learning and growing process that you go through, and that's really interesting. Like when the first time you encounter that, it's quite a shock to the system.
No, 100%. But I think just to elaborate on one of the things that you said in regards to that suhbah, in essence, I think students sometimes that they don't know what to look for, and they don't. Obviously, you kind of come in. It really depends on the student, to be honest with you. But most of the time, students come in, they don't really know much, so they're kind of coming in with a clean slate. And I think oftentimes they grow or they journey with the teacher, but sometimes people don't realize the greatness of their teachers. And I think sometimes it either has to be explicitly mentioned to them, or you have to just, you know, ponder and think about, you know, the greatness of the teachers, how sincere they are, you know, how dedicated they are, how professional they are, and a lot of the character traits that they have. And, you know, in a world where young males and obviously females as well, for this particular podcast or conversation, are looking for role models and those guides and those shuyukh and mashayikh and asatidha that those students have those people, and I think oftentimes greatness, you know, you think it's a very big mountain or something which is going to be magnanimous and something which is going to be incredible in stature or physicality, but oftentimes it's those people who walk past you and their greatness is ignored, really. People miss it.
Oh yeah, like 100%. Like, I mean, and I can see that with some of my teachers. Like one of my teachers in Mauritania, if you didn't know who he was, you would never ever know that this man sitting right in front of you is a great sheikh, is a wali of Allah, and like he is someone who is just completely at the service of the people. You know, because when he comes to you so humbly, he speaks to you so softly, he teaches you in such a way. And one of my teachers once said that you don't see the light. So you don't see the light while you're in it. And sometimes, like, it's not until a student kind of like leaves their teacher or has finished their studies that they can walk back and say, wow, my teacher was really something, even if they couldn't see it at the time. And you see that happening a lot. Sometimes you can't see the woods for the trees, and sometimes as a student, it's important for you to take a step back while you're in the light so you can appreciate that the light that you're basking in.
100%. Yeah, reflection is so important. But I think, yes, exactly what you said, really, is that humility. And I think it's just the untrained eye, like, and the lack of education. You just have to be educated on those things, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Well, Ustadhah Khadijah, inshallah, I think that's the chapter of studies closed, unless you want to mention anything else on that.
No, I think I said too much.
So inshallah, I think around this time after Yemen, you came back, and then the next significant part of your life was being appointed as a female resident scholar in Zia al-Quran Mosque, where Imam Hassan Rabbani is, and his father is, mashallah. And just, take us through that process, and inshallah, just introduce us to that and some of the things that you did. Inshallah, we'll discuss it further.
Okay, yeah, so in Zia al-Quran, so I started teaching in Zia al-Quran, I think it was in the beginning of 2018 maybe. So I had just at that point in time I had finished my studies and stuff in Yemen, and I had came back, and it was really interesting how it all came about. So I was invited, it was Sheikh Hassan's dad, actually, I think was one of the first people who approached me, because I had to give a talk in another masjid, and he happened to be amongst the imams who were in attendance in this masjid, and we had a short conversation, and then sometime later, not that much long later, Imam Hassan kind of reached out to me and asked me about my studies and stuff, and asked me if I wanted to jump on board teaching. And I was totally full of humour. I was yeah, but I was a little bit nervous about the situation as well, because previous to that, I had never taught before, so I was just how am I going to do this? I was how am I going to teach people? How am I going to go out there and do it? And my first kind of experience with the Quran teaching was primarily teaching kids. And I thought to myself, I was okay, how am I going to deal with these kids? How am I going to deal with these students? And my thought process went back to how my teachers dealt with me. So I kind of modelled my style more on my teachers that I had encountered in Yemen. And my teachers had always treated, even my teachers now, in Senegal and Mauritania, they've always treated me like I was one of their children. They always treated me as if, the bond was more than just being a student. You were like their child. And I applied that. I applied that to what I wanted to do with these kids. And one of the things I also applied in that, which was an example that I learned from my teachers, was not about, as I promised myself I wasn't going to raise my voice. So that was the two plans that I had in my mind. So it began first with teaching kids, and then that went into me being project manager there for education, and that grew into starting then to host halakas for ladies, teach the books at Imam al-Haddad and stuff. And then it started to be outreach projects. Then it was started to deal with the Muslim Council, and then it kind of got into the kind of faith-based counselling and the Seerah as well. So there was a lot of things going on. So as time went on, my responsibilities grew. What I was participating in was growing, community projects, outreach projects, having dealings with the Muslim Council, and just, general dealing with the community, that kind of grew a lot, and I became heavily involved in the community. I became heavily involved with the sisters, and not just in Zia Al Quran. Like, I had most of my work took place in Zia Al Quran, and Zia Al Quran was the place that I was kind of, the kind of resident female scholar in that establishment or in that masjid. But I kind of done some work with some other masjids as well. But my primary work was out of Zia Al Quran.
And was that mainly dealing with females, or obviously I think your official title was that, but as in what actually transpired so in terms of what you were doing and the event?
Yes. My majority interaction was with females. So, generally speaking, like, me and Imam Hassan kind of had a system between ourselves, where he would send like women or females who wanted to speak more in depth about different things, who would feel more comfortable with a female. He would send them to me. He would send them my way. Me and Imam Hassan, like, mashallah, we had a really great working relationship as we kind of worked hand in hand. Even in certain times, there would be cases where both of us would be involved with like the same people and giving the Seerah and the counselling and the same thing. But a lot of my work was primarily with women. There was the odd time that I had, a young student or a young brother that needed to, that felt like they wanted to come to me from the Seerah, but the majority of my workings was with women.
MashaAllah. So looking back at that time, how in hindsight, MashaAllah, it's a long time, 4 years.
Yeah, a long time.
What are your thoughts or reflections during that time? And this is the first time now that obviously you've, in a work capacity, you're in that field of religion, mainly dealing with sisters and all the different activities that you touched upon.
Yeah, like it's been a very interesting journey there, because it's been an interesting journey in the sense of not only are you working with these people and you're committing yourself to that in the religious field, but you're also learning lessons within yourself about your boundaries, about where you can actually help, where you have the expertise to help, where you can develop the expertise to help, and where actually, learning to say, like, I don't think I'm suited for this particular role.
Yeah, that's important because I think or for a graduate who comes out of any madrasa, it's like, okay, and you hear that the Prophet ﷺ never used to say no, and so you very innocently kind of like, mashallah, that's fine, I'll do. And what you don't realize is that you don't follow the principle of balance, where وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, and خَيْرُ الْأُمُورِ أَوْسَطُهَا, and the element of being mutawassit, being balanced and moderate, the window.
Yeah, because so
I think it's interesting, and you learn a lot from experience. And one of the things you touched upon is, and that work life is, exactly that, understanding your professional boundaries. So that's exactly where it is, knowing what your boundaries are, and that's how you become moderate or balanced. Because you're like, okay, those things are not my, not part of my, my remit, as they say. And
that's the thing is, for me, it's like I've became very firm on myself, because I think sometimes, like, as a student and as a graduate, one of the things our teachers always used to say is, like, be firm with yourself but be gentle with others, right? In that respect. And so, and every day, like, I used to wake up and just be like, right, who am I doing this for? am I doing it for myself, or am I doing it for Allah? Like, that was another thing that our teachers taught us, to like ask ourselves, like, why are we doing this? And so I took it kind of firmly upon myself. You know, if someone came to me with a situation, or someone came to me to offer me a talk about such and such, or we're inviting you to do such and such or such and such, I would sit for a moment. I would really just sit there for a moment and be like, okay, can I actually do this? Is this within my remit? Is this something that I have knowledge about, that I can speak about? Is this something, because like for me, I think it's like, you know, very important, like Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu said, like saying I don't know is part of faith, you know. So I think like sometimes in the beginning, like, you know, when you've freshly just graduated from your studies, because like while you're in your studies, you only have to bother about yourself, but you have Himman, you have high hopes, right? And then you graduate, and then sometimes, like, I mean, I know I was like this when I graduated. You want to kind of go out and save the world. Like, you've got Himma to do everything. I'm going to make this halaqah. I'm going to do these events. I'm going to make this program. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to work with these people. I'm going to work with the most vulnerable people. I'm going to, like, you know, you have all these things that you want to do. So in the beginning, you, like you say yes to everything, because the Prophet ﷺ never says no. So you say yes to everything, and then you find yourself completely burnt out. You get so burnt out, it's unbelievable. And I think like in my first year involved in that work, I was ill all the time. I always had the cold, I always had the flu, I always had an infection, there was always something going on, because I just spread myself too thinly. And it was actually, you know, like, subhanAllah, like Imam Hassan became like a mentor to me in that sense as well, because he had like a wealth of experience, and his experience grows all the time, mashallah. You know, he kind of became like a mentor to me in that sense as well, as in like, okay, sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes you have to admit when you feel like someone else is better suited to this, you know, maybe event you've been invited to, or this interview that you've been invited to do, or in this situation, like, you know. And that's when I kind of really started learning after my first year of being like completely burnt out. It is learning how it is professionally, your professional remit, your professional boundaries, you know, how not to get too emotionally invested, because I think sometimes that can become a thing. Like, people working with people, sometimes you get emotionally invested in certain situations, and you have to feel the rahmah, you have to have the empathy for people, but you need to learn as a person yourself where that cut off is and where that boundary is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's very important, actually, because, yeah, well, again, I think if you're like a sincere person and you know, you genuinely care about people, and like you said, you have that element of altruistic love, is probably the best way that I can call it, or love for the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you do become emotionally invested. But I think at the same time, you have to be detached in a sense. Like, I'll give you a really good example of this. I remember when I was doing a 6 weeks chaplaincy course in Addenbrooks whilst I was a student in Cambridge Muslim College, and this is one of the things that came to my mind straight away. I was like, you guys are just constantly dealing with pain and suffering. I was like, do you guys go insane? Obviously, I never said that, but that's what I was thinking. And I was like, I worded it like, you know, how do you guys offload? Like, and this is the thing, like, imams, people don't realize imams are dealing with, part of their remit is, or even I think in your position, is like there's a counselling aspect to it, and people think that the imam knows everything, or the female scholar, the alima, knows everything, and you might not. And see, this is the thing, and it does bring you into that conversation of, okay, what is an imam, and so on. So I'll take another thing as well that I was looking at, and it comes down to time. Like, sometimes, you know, you might want to do everything, but you can't. So I was looking at Cambridge Muslim College, their website recently, and they've, not Cambridge Muslim College, sorry, Cambridge Central Mosque, the mosque, and they have like on their website like certain times when you can meet the imam, and then there's like certain things that they won't do. And I thought that was very interesting. You know, Ustadhah Khadijah, I think we're going to have to stop